Welcome traders, I am Adam from Trade with Precision and welcome to IC Markets Market Commentary. So, very exciting week, I think. We're going to see some really nice volatility finally. And actually, I want to show you the VIX. So the VIX here, you can see actually having a little bit of a burst and starting to move up a little bit higher. So this is something we haven't really experienced in a while. And actually, so this is a really good sign, in my opinion, just to see a little bit more volatility in a good way, a bit more kind of energy returning to the markets. Let's have a look at that dollar index. So the dollar index, interestingly, for me, actually managed to close back within the range here. And so this one here is still within the range, and therefore there's a very real possibility that this coming week, there's still a possibility that we may just find ourselves back within a range within the currency market. So waiting for that dollar to commit, and there were some signs that that dollar was attempting to strengthen. And again, this week, we'll see if it does ultimately pull back into the moving averages and take another attempt at that key level of support for euro dollar and break through. Absolutely a very fair possibility. But we are still within the range, and therefore, until we break out the range, we just have to treat it as that. So hopefully this week will be one of those weeks where that does actually happen. Moving on and having a look at dollar yen, principally a lot of the yen pairs, euro yen, Swissy yen, CAD yen, obviously Aussie yen, all having a big strong correction yesterday within an uptrend. They look really good. They've had longer term weekly uptrends that look really good. And actually, I'm looking for any potential bullish candles to form in the moving averages here for potential buying opportunities if that trend continues to the upside. Gold finishing relatively strong actually on Friday, producing a bullish candle here near the moving averages. There may well be some resistance at that 4050 level, but this bullish candle looks very much as though the market is, gold is going to take another run if we break the high of this candle. My expectation is it is going to take another run at those highs. Having a look here at silver as well. Silver, you can see it's, historic highs now. It's managed to hit that $50 mark. In fact, arguably, it's managed to tap that $51 mark. And so we can see it's struggling a little bit here. So I'd like to see a little bit of a pullback here, letting off some of that buying pressure, and again, coming back into the moving averages and producing a bullish candle and taking another run to the upside. So that could very well be the case by the end of the week. We see a bit of a pullback into the moving averages and we see another run up at those highs. We'll see if that's going to be the case or if we're ultimately going to get a deeper correction. For me, I'm of the opinion that obviously gold and silver are in a bit of a bubble now and are being seen very much as a form of security and safety in so much uncertainty going on in the markets right now, and therefore I don't really have any expectations that this will have a much bigger correction at this time. Any correction would be welcome. The trend itself is very strong and relatively healthy, but it has been very much overextended on a monthly basis, and therefore any kind of a correction here I think would be also a good buying opportunity once we get back to those moving averages. That being said, I'm not really convinced that that's necessarily going to happen this coming week. US government is still obviously shut down at the moment. I'm also not really convinced that's going to open up anytime soon. And so therefore, I think we're going to see a lot of what happened last week carry over. There'll probably be a minimum release of US data because obviously those departments are potentially closed. And so for now, I expect these markets to have shorter pullbacks and attempt to continue to break to this level. It's going to be very interesting to see how silver is going to deal with this level ultimately. But gold also continues to look relatively healthy with its trend. Let's have a look at crude oil. So crude oil breaking down through support. This was a relatively straightforward trade this coming week. We broke through support, continued down, pulled back into the moving averages, produced a nice little rejection candle and a nice little bearish candle, and we have continued to the downside. So that one actually turning out relatively well. The longer term trend for crude oil is certainly to the downside here. We could just see a series of lower highs, lower lows, but we actually managed to break through a key level of support, and now we're coming back down, or at least now we're coming down into areas we haven't been to in a while. So I'm expecting this to head down towards that $54 mark in the coming days. Any kind of a pullback here again should provide selling opportunities or re-entries to the downside there. Let's have a look at the global markets. So we had a very heavy sell-off on Friday, and there's a lot of talk of this potentially being the beginning of the AI bubble popping and crashing. But one of the things I want to just include here is that, we've been overdue for a really solid weekly correction for quite a while, especially from a monthly perspective. If you look here, and this is really the key thing, is looking at that monthly chart to get a sense of perspective. Despite how dramatic Friday's correction, and I'm going to call it a correction for now, appeared to be, we still actually have a long way to go to get a really nice, healthy correction, letting off some of this buying pressure. So I'd love to see this pull back down towards 6,100, 6,090. That would be a fantastic correction to have and would provide some re-entry opportunities. So something that may happen, and then we get a nice Santa Claus rally. So if we can get a nice sell-off now, just letting off some of that buying pressure that's built up since April, if we could get that, that would be fantastic. And then finishing off, obviously, the end of the year with a nice rally to the upside would be amazing. So for now, I'm treating this more as a correction, certainly on the weekly and potentially on the monthly. So this next week is going to be very interesting because I want to see how much further the market falls. For now, I'm going to treat it as as I said, it can go as far as 6,100, and I would still consider that relatively healthy. But my immediate expectations is to see a pullback to about 6,300 this coming week. And how the week finishes is going to be critical. If it finishes with a nice bullish candle, that is going to imply that the market has let off that buying pressure and is ready to keep going to the upside. US tech as well. Again, having a look at this, let's get some perspective here. Beautiful bearish candle here. We haven't really had a pullback since April, and actually a pullback even here down to 22,000 would be a fantastic relief of that buying pressure. And again, that's what I'm looking for. Will it last 1 or 2 or 3 weeks? How far will it pull back? Really looking for this to pull back down to these key levels, back in towards the weekly lows, and then again possibly as far as 22,000. But my initial expectation this week is how much further does it drop, and of course, how does it recover this week, or do we have to wait a few more weeks for that to be the case? But right now, this is great. Actually, the market has been very overdue to let off some of that buying pressure, and again, lovely to see how those technicals ultimately played out. We can see the continued bearish divergence that's been building up. We've been talking about this for a while, and in principle, as I said, the markets are still bullish, but this is, it has just been pushing and pushing and pushing without taking a breather, and it does need meaningful pullbacks, and this is the very first one we've really had in a while. So it's a good thing, it's not a bad thing. All right. I say that at this time, it's a good thing, not a bad thing. Interesting here, looking even at the Russell 2000, we've got a bit of a double top behavior here. We've broken that low, so we know it's probably going to pull back a little bit further. If we have a look again at that weekly, yes, it would make sense for now to see these markets pulling back in again from a monthly perspective as well, pulling back down towards these, back down towards the moving averages over here. 22,200 would be amazing as well. Again, as I said, the further back we pull back now within reason back towards these moving averages, the better it is obviously for the remainder of 2025 and 2026. So letting off some of that buying pressure, but we can also see some of these levels holding. All right, let's have a look again at a non-US one. This is the Seng, which has been one of my favorites next to the Nikkei outside of the US because non-US markets have been doing so well. This is a very nice pullback into the moving averages. Again, good idea to have a look at the weekly and the monthly to get a sense of it. And you can see here, we really haven't pulled back to the moving averages. We can even pull back here as far as 22,000 and still be relatively healthy. So how we perform obviously between now and November and December is going to be quite important. But this coming week, we sold right into the close. And I suspect it's because it's been so long overdue that it's quite a bit of an overselling, quite a bit of an overreaction. And it certainly seems dramatic, tied to the increase in tariffs against China, which it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. Okay, so I'll be looking to see if the market recovers this week. I do expect it possibly to head a little bit lower. I want to see how it finishes though. Does it go lower and finish lower, or does it ultimately try and recover? Let's have a look at Tesla quickly as well. You can see Tesla bumping its head up here against resistance. So let's just mark that level. So that level there being closer to 465. And the question then is, will we see it pull back into these lows here around that 360 mark, or just further back down into 375 coming into these previous lows over here? So again, want to see how that is, but for now it is still very much in an uptrend. And let's finish with Nvidia and then Bitcoin. Nvidia here showing a little bit more weakness. We had a big run up, a small pullback, and another run, and immediately producing a bit of a greystone doji here. So I do think there's a fair chance we might find ourselves pulling back in towards these lows and possibly going into a bit of a consolidation. We'll see how that goes. But yes, this is implying, because it's only just broken to a new high and rejected that already, that we could see a bit of a pullback back into 170. Let's finish off with Bitcoin. And so here we've got these strong highs. We can see from a weekly perspective, we're still within the range. This level of resistance has held as support. So I want to see if that does hold this week, if it continues to hold this week. Failing that, I would expect it to just break down and come back down towards these lows here, or possibly even stay above that. So 100,000 is going to be really the line in the sand, and we're still well above that. So let's see, 100,000 will be that line in the sand, and let's see how it does. So ladies and gentlemen, let's keep calm and carry on trading. There should be some potential opportunities this week. Those yen crosses, I apologize, this video is a bit longer, but I think that it's worthwhile going into a little bit more detail this time. All right, and let's manage our risk appropriately. Remember, never trade without a stop loss and always manage your risk amounts per trade. Thank you very much.